Through its research and convenings, the Center on Philanthropy and Public Policy seeks to make philanthropy more impactful today and to create a smarter, stronger sector for tomorrow.
I want to start the program now because we have a lot to cover on impact investing and change in philanthropy, as Ken so rightly encouraged us and inspired us earlier. I do want to let you know that we're going to save about 15 minutes at least for questions after the exchange between Jean and Jeff. So you should see small 3x5 cards on the tables and some pens. So if you have questions, things come to mind as the conversation unfolds, please write them down. And then Farah and Bree, who are at the back of the room, get their attention and they'll collect them and bring them up, and we'll try to get to as many as we can in the allotted time. I'm really happy that Jean is here today. She's actively engaged philanthropist, investor, and a pioneer in the world of interactive technologies. Actually, a high-tech person that's on the East Coast, not the West Coast. Her career in the private sector spanned nearly 2 decades before she and her husband, Steve Case, created the Case Foundation in 1997. And prior to co-founding the Case Foundation, she spent a career in the technology industry as an executive, especially most recent, her last stint was as a senior executive at AOL. Jean and Steve joined the Giving Pledge that our friends Bill Gates and Warren Buffett started, and they have publicly reaffirmed their commitment to give away the majority of their wealth to fund charitable causes. The Case Foundation is recognized. The Case Foundation is recognized for its leadership in leveraging new technologies and applying innovative approaches to increase giving, catalyze civic and business participation, and promote innovation, collaboration, and leadership in the nonprofit sector. She is a passionate believer in all things digital and the amazing potential of technology to change the world for the better. We are delighted to have Jean with us today as our distinguished speaker. She's going to be engaged in a conversation with Jeff Hoffman, who is a Center board member. Jeff is a principal in Jeffrey Hoffman and Associates, has a long and dedicated career to issues of civic engagement, volunteerism, and corporate social responsibility. And they actually have worked together in many ways, especially as board members of the Points of Light Foundation. So we are excited that they're here. And while they come up to the stage, I want to play a short video clip for you. This is a campaign that caught my attention a couple of years ago that the Case Foundation launched as part of its 15th anniversary in June 2012. It's basically talking about how to be fearless. So could we roll the clip while Jean and Jeff sort of come up?
Thanks.
If you added up all the times you failed, all the times you came up short, would you try again? What if failure wasn't a limitation? What if taking risks was your status quo? What kind of world would you imagine? When global challenges seem overwhelming, we need to create unlikely partnerships, experiment with new thinking, and set audacious goals. To build a better world, to make a real difference, we have to take bigger risks, make bigger bets. And if we fail, and fail again, we have to get right back up, stronger than we were before. To live in a world worth living in, we have to let challenge inspire us. We have to take risks, be bold, and let urgency conquer fear. We have to be fearless.
Thanks, Jim, and Jean, an incredible video. First of all, I have to thank you for putting Walt and Mickey in there. I loved that when I first saw it.
Our nod to LA here, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to point out some of the words in that. I mean, it's a 1-minute video, but there are such powerful words. I mean, be fearless, which we're going to talk about. But what if failure is not a limitation? How many of us think that? I mean, that's an incredible concept that we're going to explore today. Set audacious goals. Take bigger risks. Make bigger bets. Be bold. Let urgency conquer fear. And, I have to ask you, I mean, that urgency and conquering and being fearless, how did you get into this? How did you decide that you were going to dedicate your life to philanthropy?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to get into that, but let me say, this is a great audience. I've had the opportunity to meet many of you in the last hour, and I told Ken, gosh, I didn't know he would be the warm-up act for our Be Fearless talk and some of the things that he put forward. And Shirley, we haven't met, but I'm honored to be here for general purposes, but when someone comes on our birthday, like, wow, happy birthday, okay? So what really drew me to philanthropy, I think, the roots of it, I actually was an early recipient of philanthropy, people's time and people's money. I was raised by a single mom who raised 4 kids alone. And because of that, we had some challenges. And we had a wonderful, beautiful community come around us, lift us up, and help support us, and really create paths to opportunity for me. I was on full scholarship at a private school, which led me to an early mentor who was first a judge, then a mayor, became congressman. And so as I came out of school, I went to work for him in his congressional office. And that was sort of the beginning of really creating a terrific path and opportunity for me. And simply none of that would have happened, I'm quite certain, unless there were people like everyone here in this room basically saying, okay, I'll spend my time, my precious money, trying to create an opportunity for someone else. And so I really was a recipient of it. But this idea of opportunity for all, I feel like I've been very privileged in my life because, as I said, I started out really on the other side where there weren't clear paths to opportunity. And as I sit here today, I'm embarrassed by the rich opportunities we have every day, to engage in things, to, learn, to meet people, etc. And so I think we're really super passionate about saying, okay, we've been fortunate enough to land on this side of life, and there's nothing more we want to do than make sure that we can ensure opportunity for all through the resources that we have.
Well, you got to that point through philanthropy, through having a great mentor, a good education. You had a very successful career in a little company called AOL, who, the forefront of the internet movement. But then you came back to that philanthropy.
I did.
What was your pivot there?
I think we're going to talk about a lot of things today, and the reason that you saw the Be Fearless video is it was really sort of a study that we did on transformative breakthroughs, whether they be causes, movements, whatever. And Jeff highlighted some of the principles, but we'll go through them. But even at AOL, the term impact investing wasn't known yet. But we were very much a mission-driven organization at the very beginning. In fact, many of us felt at the time AOL could have been a nonprofit because what we were out to do was democratize access to ideas, information, and communication, to really level the playing field of opportunity, if you will. And so I think we had as a spirit in the company, the DNA of the company was very much mission-driven. In my role as an executive there, it was under my responsibility to sort of stand up the AOL Foundation. And that was my toe in the water, really, into sort of the official world of philanthropy. But I think we always knew that certainly when I would retire, we would turn and make it more of a full-time thing, which is what we did in 1997. And we really spent a lot of time, I did, just trying to get my sea legs. I mean, Fred and I were talking this morning, and if you talk to a lot of folks who, come out of, say, an intense business career, and then they say, okay, I'm going to focus on a nonprofit or a philanthropy, there's a little bit of adjustment that happens. I felt like I didn't walk right or talk right, or, I didn't have the language, and I really did feel like a fish out of water for some time. But there were wonderful people around me, and sort of at the end of the day, what it took me about maybe 3 or 5 years to learn was the very same person, the very same things that had led to success in business would likely be the way to have success in philanthropy as well. But it wasn't so obvious to me when we got started. So the Be Fearless campaign that you saw the video of, as we turned 15, we really used it as a reflection point. And we said, what have we learned and what are we seeing around the world? What do we see as we look back? What do we see as we look around in our own work and the work of partners? Pretty much everything the Case Foundation does, we do collaboratively. Don't lay claim to anything on our own, including this Be Fearless work. And so we hired a firm, and we basically said, as we come together as a team and we think about the daunting challenges in our communities, in our nation, and around the world, gosh, it's not a very pretty story. A lot of the problems have been with us for a millennium, okay? Some for just hundreds of years. And yet in many places, there have been a lot of money and a lot of organizations trying to sort of chase solutions, if you will. But if you flip the coin, there really are some bright spots where there's been transformational breakthrough. So we hired a firm to say, all right, we want to go to school on that. What's behind the business when it works? And so from that was born 5 principles that were covered somewhat in the video you just saw. Quickly, they are make big bets and make history. Experiment early and often. Take risks is really that. And I want to pause on that one specifically because, again, coming out of business and into philanthropy in the nonprofit world, I was quite stunned to realize I thought philanthropy should be the first risk capital, right? Because it's people's own money. It's not government money. It's not a corporate driving it that worries about shouldn't philanthropy be out there on the front lines demonstrating, experiencing, trying to find solutions in our communities? But in fact, we had not seen a lot of that in philanthropy. And not just us. I'm saying if you do a study on it, it's quite clear. And that makes sense to me. I often say, if I'm taking my own $100, I'm going to take a risk with my $100, right? I'm risk tolerant with my own money, and it's my decision. But if you, Fred, give me your $100, I'm going to go into protection mode. I'm going to go into risk aversion mode because I want to protect your reputation, and you've given me this big responsibility. But in fact, every foundation, whether 100 years old or 10 years old, was most likely started by an entrepreneur who broke through and found success because they took risks. So the risk-taking piece, and we want to call even the biggest, oldest foundations, including young ones like ourselves, we really want to call them to acknowledge that to find new solutions, and we desperately need new solutions to old problems, we're going to have to take risks. We're going to have to experiment early and often. And we've really worked with the sector to say, can you find some room in the things you go out and try? Is that 1%? Is that 5%? Is that one thing you'll do this year? To take some risks and experiment. Now, the whole point here is that we need innovation in this space, right? If you're going to innovate and you're going to take risks, there's a chance you'll fail. And, we spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs. And every great company and every great sort of entrepreneur you've heard of or corporate leader, guess what? Their path is riddled with failures. That's how they found, an innovative approach. It's just not reality to think that you can innovate without risking failure. And so it's an interesting conversation we have. As a foundation, I've written about our failures, and we do things called Failed Fest. Let's say we're at a 2-day conference here together, and we invite people to stand up and tell their stories, not because we're celebrating failure, but because when we all start acknowledging, guess what? 100% of the time, we don't always get it right. Mm-hmm. It starts to make folks a little more comfortable, and they'll come out from the shadows and try some things if they feel like it's okay sometimes to fail. Now, I will say we found it always helpful to add a little alcohol to the mix, wine or beer. People get a little more honest on the old Fail Fest when we do that. But really, we've been thrilled at various philanthropy gatherings and nonprofit gatherings to hold those dialogues.
So going back to the 5.
Yes.
I think
big bets, experiment early and often. We say fail fast, fail forward, make failure matter. That's the 3rd. Reach beyond your bubble. And that is something that as I moved around the room out there and met some folks today, I'm super impressed with the collaboration that I'm seeing in this crowd. And I must tell you, it's quite rare. You know, some folks were asking or saying that LA is seen as different in philanthropy or whatever. I haven't really heard that at all. But what I will leave here saying is LA is doing some really awesome things on collaboration. Jim, in bringing together the biggest foundations to talk to each other. Well, you know, most places you'd go, duh, but actually, that's radical. Okay, we're a sector that is not known first for its collaboration. But the reach beyond your bubble is not just collaboration within your own space, but making sure you have very diverse perspectives. And again, Ken touched on some of this in his remarks. It's a broad set of perspectives. And most importantly, and this one really blew my mind when I came into philanthropy, it's too often the case that the very people you're trying to serve, you don't have their voice at the table. And the bottom line is, if you don't have someone sitting at your table that looks different, sounds different, brings a different perspective, it's going to be harder, really, to find innovative new thinking to approach the challenges. And if you don't have the voice you're trying to serve somewhere in the mix, you know, good luck getting it right. It doesn't really work that way. And then the last one is let urgency conquer fear. And I followed someone at a conference last year, and he was from the business sector, and he said, you know, I always know when I'm in the philanthropy world because people talk a little slower and they walk a little slower. And, you know, that's obviously painting a brush that isn't fair. But the bottom line is we do need to embrace urgency. And, you know, there are urgent needs and urgent challenges. And I think when you walk into many organizations, you know what that feels like. We're on a roll here. We've got a big mission, and let's get to it. But the other thing about that is if you recognize that you're on sort of an urgent mission, it also helps you get a little more comfortable with taking risks because urgency does conquer fear. I often think of Rosa Parks, right? What really emboldened that woman to get on a bus? Really, and change history for all time, certainly in our nation. And I think it was urgency conquering fear. She knew something had to change, and she overcame fear to get on that bus. Now, that's a personal action by one person, but what organizationally might we find the willingness to do? Because, you know, the needs are just too urgent. Martin Luther King called it the fierce urgency of now. And I think we're living in that time as we watch Baltimore and we watch communities, you know, explode and needs just all over the place in our communities.
So, well, first of all, how many of you want to go to the Fail Fest?
All right!
I don't know, it sounds like a great time to me, and I've got a long list of things to talk about. But seriously, I mean, it's, you know, the principles, I think, are so solid, and they make a lot of sense. And this is a campaign. How are you pushing it out?
Sure.
Who is it going to, and are you seeing a result from it?
Thank you for that. So Jeff mentioned we launched it a few years ago, and at first we sort of just put it out there, and then we began a series of dialogues and presentations, more or less to teach it as a concept, not because it's our thinking, but because there was good study around these principles are behind where we see breakthroughs and transformation. So I would say at least the first year, if not the first year and a half, was really just going out and talking to rooms like this and spending time with people and kind of trying to spread the word about what had been uncovered here, basically, so that we'd have a little bit of a roadmap. We've switched, and if you go to casefoundation.org, we now have a series of case studies of organizations that have embraced this and what they're finding as a result. We're going to put more and more data out there, but now we also have a little bit of a curriculum online, things we'll walk you through. When I teach students, I teach Be Fearless, and I specifically have them, and I do this sometimes with boards or executive management teams, try to help them understand where are they in risk tolerance, right? Because the DNA of some organizations is, you know, total stiff arm, like we are just not willing to, you know, try big experiments. But I say, could you maybe take 1% of your budget and make it, you know, experimental, R&D, try something new? Could you take one project? So there are ways that we try to bring people from, I'm really afraid of this and I don't want to, you know, risk looking like a fool, okay, or ruining my organization, to, okay, but toe-in-the-water approaches. And really, we've really seen some remarkable change in organizations where it might have started with, we'll try one thing. And guess what? Everybody got really jazzed, and now we see more and more and more activity. We'll probably wait till the 20th before we really have what we would consider, you know, a full view of where has the impact been. But we're measuring it, we're producing case studies. We have a lot of data on the Case Foundation site around what this is all about and what we've seen.
So let's transition from Be Fearless into another area you're really focusing on right now, and that's impact investing.
Yeah.
And we are all hearing a lot about impact investing, but I don't know about you, but we could probably go around the room and come up with 10 different definitions of what that means.
Right.
What's your definition?
So my favorite story to tell on this is going to this confusion issue. Mark Andreessen is a dear friend. We actually had acquired Netscape in our old AOL days, and Mark was too young to rent a car back then. So we had to kind of take him under our wing. And we were pretty young too, but he was really young. But anyway, when Mark first heard about impact investing, he said, impact investing is like a houseboat. It's not a good house, and it's not a good boat. So we do have those naysayers out there. Fast forward the tape, right? We love Mark. What did he do? He just invested in an impact investing company in this last year. So he's really come around. And this is what we see with a number of different investors. I will say impact investing has a nomenclature problem because there's way too many things that get tucked up under it. And sort of the broad categories, for those of you that aren't really familiar with the space, when we talk about it, we are typically talking about a new class of entrepreneurs coming along who want to build new, exciting businesses that address social challenges. So in addition to a financial return, they are promising a social return in the businesses that they're building. We can talk